If the Gazans stay inside Gaza, the IDF is going to have to stay inside Gaza. Their desire to commit terror attacks against innocent Israelis is insatiable. I don't expect that the ceasefire is going to hold. Those are the minimum terms that Prime Minister Netanyahu is demanding. I watch these future officers as they walk through gas chambers and see the ovens into which our people were flung. The military operations that are taking place inside the Gaza Strip were ramped up in order to drive Hamas back to the negotiating table so that Israel could redeem our hostages. At the moment, the negotiations for the redemption and the return of our hostages are at a complete standstill. And what underpins this operation is the idea that the IDF will operate, then we will assess how effective those operations have been when it comes to driving Hamas back to negotiating. And if they have not been effective, then we will intensify our military maneuvers inside the Gaza Strip. So we're now at the stage where the government and the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense and even the Chief of Staff of the IDF are having to make the decision as to how they can intensify this operation inside Gaza. And the Prime Minister made a very clear statement some days ago, actually last Saturday, where he expressed that under no circumstances would he surrender to Hamas. He expressed that Hamas needed to be destroyed, and he didn't do that to the exclusion of the additional goal of this war, namely the rescuing and return of all of our hostages. But he did express that under no circumstances could Hamas be allowed to retain and to maintain power inside the Gaza Strip. So I think that unless there is a change in the obduracy of the Hamas terror organization, you are going to see an increase in IDF operations inside Gaza. And Israelis did not ask to have to return to the Gaza Strip. We withdrew from Gaza in its entirety in 2005 by way of a very controversial, very heart-wrenching disengagement under the premiership of Ariel Sharon. We are there purely because of the horrors that were carried out against us during the October 7th massacre launched by Hamas against innocent Israelis that resulted in the kidnapping of 252 people and the murder of 1,200 Israelis. Now, in any circumstance whatsoever, Hamas cannot be permitted to constitute a threat towards the Israeli people ever again. And if that means that Israel is going to have a long-term presence inside the Gaza Strip, then that is what will happen. President Donald Trump has put forward a very bold but very clear policy with regard to the future of Gaza, and it calls for the relocation of the Gazan population in its entirety out of the Gaza Strip. I think with that in mind, we can come to a very, very simple equation. If the Gazans stay inside Gaza, the IDF is going to have to stay inside Gaza because it's from among the Gazan people that Hamas recruits to its terrorist ranks. However, if the Gazans are relocated out of the Gaza Strip, you could then see the withdrawal of the Israel Defense Forces from that enclave. In the event that there is the relocation of the Gazan population out of the Gaza Strip, that is going to require a very significant presence from among the Israel Defense Forces as that process is undertaken. By equal measure, if there is an effort to completely destroy Hamas by way of an intensification of the fighting inside the Gaza Strip, that is also going to require a very significant presence of IDF troops inside Gaza. In either scenario, though, hopefully that presence would be temporary rather than permanent. The Israel Defense Forces are comprised of conscripts who are drafted straight out of high school and then sworn into the ranks of the IDF, but the bulk of the military is actually comprised of reservists who answer the call when drafted to come to the line and to fight whichever fight it is that they're required to engage in. Now, as just one veteran of service there, serving in the IDF as a reservist is not a democratic process. You are summoned and you serve. But it's also not enforced, meaning if you are drafted to the military and you don't report for duty, nobody's going to come to your house and pull you from your abode and tell you that you have to grab a gun and put on a uniform and move forward. There does, therefore, need to be high morale and high belief in the mission statement of any mass reserved draft. And I believe that expressing very clearly that the goal is to once and for all wipe out Hamas from inside the Gaza Strip, that goal will enjoy popular support among the reservist ranks. So the Israel Defense Forces has killed 140 terrorists since the announcement of this ceasefire between Lebanon and between the State of Israel. And the reason for that is that Hezbollah is constantly and will continue in perpetuity to attempt to re-entrench itself back on the border between southern Lebanon and northern Israel, because it's from those positions that it is able to launch terror attacks, terror raids, even incidentally to penetrate into Israel by way of terror tunnels. And that is the goal of Hezbollah terrorist operatives. There is no ceasefire with these people. There is only the resolve to destroy them as they seek to destroy and to attack and to kill innocent Israelis. And so this strike is emblematic of the fact that the IDF is hard at work, battling back against Hezbollah, trying its very best to enforce the terms of this very, very flawed ceasefire, and above all things, making sure that Hezbollah does not return to the border between southern Lebanon and northern Israel. I have personally walked inside the terror tunnels, the attack tunnels that Hezbollah was burrowing from southern Lebanon into northern Israel. Their desire to attack innocent Jews is insatiable. Their desire to commit terror attacks against innocent Israelis is insatiable. And the only appropriate response to such an appetite is to destroy it at its source, namely to eliminate the terrorists as and when they become exposed for targeting. And that is why 140 of such terrorists have been eliminated by the IDF since the ceasefire came about. And I don't expect that the ceasefire is going to hold. Following his most recent visit to the White House, Prime Minister Netanyahu gave a recorded statement in Hebrew to the Israeli people in which he expressed that the only end to negotiations between the Americans and the Iranians that Israelis could accept would be the complete and utter destruction and detonation of all elements of Iran's nuclear enrichment program under the supervision of American forces and American supervisors. Those are the minimum terms that Prime Minister Netanyahu is demanding when it comes to the negotiations that President Trump announced the Americans were in the midst of or were about to begin with the Iranians. So you can have a shared attitude and you can be on the same side of an issue, but you can take very, very different routes to how that issue should be resolved. And incidentally, that difference is in no small part the result of simple geography. Israel is well within the firing range of anything that Iran seeks to launch towards us. The Americans are far further away. And so they do not feel the same urgency when it comes to the threat from Iran as we in Israel feel. Today on Yom HaShoah, I reflect on the murder of the 6 million, and I do so with alarm. As the co-founder of the MirYam Institute, I have the honor of bringing current and future officers of the United States Armed Forces who will soon lead thousands of soldiers to Poland. I watch these future officers as they walk through gas chambers and see the ovens into which our people were flung. I watch as they confront what took place, as they move past the mounds of human hair shorn from Jewish men and Jewish women now displayed in the Museum of Auschwitz and Birkenau. And I look on as they see the piles of shoes taken from the dead who perished in Majdanek. And as I do so, I know that these delegates, these future officers of the US Armed Forces, understand and recognize what befell the Jewish people during the Nazi Holocaust. And then I bring them to Israel, and there they see what the Jewish people has built from the remnants of our peoplehood. They see our men and our women in uniform. They see Israeli teens who graduate high school, lay down their pens, grasp instead their rifles, and swear to defend our land. And as these American cadets travel from Treblinka to Tel Aviv, all of them recognize the atrocities that can befall the Jewish people when we are subjects of another people. And they do so while also recognizing the glory that emerges when the Jewish people are reconciled with our land and our land is reconciled with its people. And while I consider that work far from ended, I do also believe that it is well begun. But none of us on this day or any other day dares to rest, for the enemies of the truth are toiling away. They are toiling away on podcasts, on YouTube, across social media, on campus and elsewhere. These pseudo-leaders vie to influence the masses with falsehoods about Jews. They peddle Holocaust revisionism and trivialize Jew hatred. Comedians, journalists, mixed martial artists, and misogynistic thugs are platforming hate speakers about Israel and the Jewish story, and they are cheered on by many thousands in the comments sections of their programming. It's because of that that with a heavy heart, I realize that the Jewish people will forever be in a war of ideas with such influencers whose ideas beget horrific actions against us. Today, that ideological war is rapidly scaling. The victors of this clash will claim the rights to the fate of truth itself, whether to preserve it or to pervert it. Today, on Yom HaShoah, let all of us ask ourselves if we are sufficiently engaged in this fight. Do we share the posts that say never again, or do we preserve our corporate neutrality instead? Do we fight to expel the evils in our political milieu, or do we cleave to party loyalties? Do we stand with Israel and the IDF overtly or furtively? Do we understand that we are at war for our very future, or do we simply wish away that harsh reality? Today, please know that the enemies of our people are targeting us again. They're doing so from the left, and make no mistake about it, they are also doing so from the right. The Jewish people are being flanked by their enemies. We must resolve that we are going to push back. And so I ask you today, please ask what you are doing to extricate yourself from the plight that our enemies would foist upon us. I pray on this day that our hostages are redeemed, our soldiers are protected, our leaders are imbued with wisdom, and that each and every one of us pushes back using all legitimate means that we have as we roar never again.